So I get the opportunity to introduce a very good friend of mine, Mr. Andy Bachman, and I also understand he has brought a +1, who is also a very good friend of mine, Jeff Gellner. So I will start with Andy Bachman, who is on your agendas. Jeff is sort of a shadow, not on the agenda present, and not in your bio, but Andy Bachman, grid strategist at INL, Idaho National Labs. Andy and I have worked near each other for over a decade. I've had the opportunity to work arm in arm together on a number of different projects over the years, whether it's with state regulators, utility commissions, with individual asset owners and operators, or globally in a number of other countries far and wide, where we're actively in search of Dunkin' Donuts to keep ourselves awake on time zones and jet lag. I've always admired Andy's ability to convey deep technical messages to executive boards, and I've watched him kind of educate and shape the thinking of critical infrastructure asset owners around the world. I've also admired, as he and I are standing next to each other in a foreign land and going through simultaneous translation, his ability to not just translate to executives and boards, but also translate to people that don't understand the words that are coming out of our mouth and the idioms that we use. He's a very skilled communicator and really helps drive people towards solutions and what they should be thinking about based on their current challenges. Today in this talk, he has brought Jeff Gellner with him as well, also with Idaho National Labs, also another individual I've had the opportunity to work with for a number of years on different control system build projects and different analysis for different industries and unique projects that I get to be a part of at Idaho National Labs. So two wonderful individuals coming. For this talk, Andy's really looking at a problem and again, trying to perform that role that he is so gifted at and taking a very deep technical engineering kind of problem and understanding that if an environment is targeted and a skilled adversary can get in, how can you cyber security wise kind of consider cybersecurity in the engineering of that operation, in the engineering of that complex process, and take as much risk out of the equation by considering kind of that cybersecurity and engineering and operations all in one kind of thought process. Really sort of a conversation that has been occurring for a number of years, started by Mike Assante, kind of thinking about what can we do from a consequence-driven, cyber-informed engineering approach. And after years of talking about it, Andy helped bring forward a new book, Countering Cyber Sabotage, that is recently released, that really looks at this whole process of an approach to consequence-driven cyber-informed engineering. You will hear the phrase CCE a number of times. That's what it's representative of. And I will turn the stage over to Andy and Jeff. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Tim, that was really generous. Jeff, I'm glad to hear your voice as we go on this trip. And Tim, we'll always have Tbilisi when it comes to the search for coffee, as long as you don't try to go in earlier than 9 a.m. in the morning. That was a very important lesson. I'm getting pop-ups. Okay, here we go. So hi, everybody. I'm Andy. I'm not as great as Tim said, but I'm going to try to do a good job. And in the upper right-hand corner is my partner, Jeff, and he chafes at the title that I gave him. So just so you know, his personality is one that does not accept that title in a way that's comfortable, although from certain perspectives, he certainly is. Also, it's a privilege to follow Joe. That was an amazing wall of very well informed words, and almost the way Rob Lee said when he introduced him, it can be embarrassing to Joe to hear that so many people recognize him as such a full, well-rounded human being, and it's just great to be able to share his mind like this. So hi, we're going to talk about CCE. The reason we say CCE is because it's a long multi-hyphenated phrase, and we can get hung up on that if we talk about it too much. In the last couple weeks since the book came out, I've been doing this virtual book tour, right? That's kind of strange, but it's a pandemic, so it's what you do. And in this presentation, I'm going to talk to you both about, like, give you a little bit of a taste of the book. Some people have bought it already and have given us great feedback. Other people have ordered it. Some people are never going to order it. That's fine. But this will give you a bite-sized piece of what this book about this methodology and about the person, the primary person who founded it, the giant on whose shoulders many of us stand, Mike Assante. So here we go. Let's see if I can master the art of slide turning, or at least just practice it. Okay, so we're gonna have 3 parts. I'm gonna do the first part in 10 minutes. Then Jeff Gellner's gonna kick in for approximately 10 minutes and talk about the fictional country of Baltavia and the substation incident that happened there, and in the appendix where it's documented in the back of the book. And finally, I'll bring you all down the home stretch with an update on the methodology. So here's the book. Just pretend you're opening a book now and by a fire with your dog. Okay, so this is the cover of it. Hopefully you're seeing it like I'm seeing it. And we got some fantastic participation from folks in the Senate, folks in large companies, and one of my favorite cyber gurus, Dan Gear, who all chimed in, read the book, gave sometimes comments on the earlier stages of the manuscript, and then wrote up a few notes about it that are all visible on Amazon, and a few of them are semi-visible here. But there you get to see the full phrase, maybe one of the only times we use it here, consequence-driven. The phrase, by the way, if you have the right background or semi-right background, really explains everything. It's consequence-driven, and that means we're not trying to protect everything. We're trying to protect a handful of things that simply must not fail for any reason, including cyber attack. And handful means not every endpoint, not every network application or data source. But a big part of this methodology is that first part, identifying those things, because not everybody knows. Some people sense, but they don't know all of them. They don't know all the processes and functions upon which they depend. Cyber informed is a little bit interesting because it makes it sound like it's a cybersecurity book. Keep saying the word cyber over and over again, but really it's just about that mode of attack. And its large part comes down to the engineering at the very end of the phrase. Because in my time anyway, in the cybersecurity community, the only time I ever really saw the word sabotage was in SIP standard 001. And we never really worked on that very much. And I never really figured out why, and maybe today still don't. But anyway, here's sabotage for you again, because it's completely appropriate for this methodology. This methodology is not designed for every type of attacker. It focuses exclusively on tier 1, the absolute best, most capable, most resourceful, adaptive adversaries, the ones we call the very best nation states. And so when they come calling, we're not concerned so much with the espionage part, except as it is part of the pathway to preparing them to perform sabotage. And you get the 5 Ds left over from World War II. In particular, it's the degrade and particularly the destroy part that we're worried about, the destruction of long lead time to replace equipment upon which our civilization depends. And so that's what we're up against with this methodology. Tim mentioned Mike, Rob mentioned Mike. This is Mike Assante. As part of the SANS community, SANS ICS community. Those of you who are older than a couple decades may have met Mike in training, in conferences. You've certainly read what he's written or read about him. He is a dear, dear friend to so many of us and a mentor to all of us. And just before he passed away in the middle of 2019 from the second bout of cancer, this one that he ultimately succumbed to, I had a chance to visit him at his house in the shadow of the Teton Mountains in Wyoming, and tried to put him at ease when we were talking about the book. He knew about the book. He was a part of it, of course, but he had earlier pledged to write the foreword. And I just let him know the book was making great progress, but that he didn't have to worry about delivering the foreword that he had pledged, because I had so many notes that wasn't going to be a problem. And I was going to construct one for him that would basically be true to his voice, because it would be coming from earlier statements. Anyway, that provoked him. He wasn't in good shape, but he started talking, and his wife, Chris, said, Andy, grab the microphone, record this. And so I did. And Mike started talking. And if you read the book, not only will you get the foreword that he dictated in his late days, but also a little bit of description of how that foreword was captured. It was pretty interesting, and just an amazing and lucky experience just before he left us. Just to get another feel for him, if you don't know him, he transformed over his life from a a Brooklyn City kind of kid, although he was a little strange, and showed early inklings that he would eventually end up as the Mike on the left, a mountain man converted by some of Jeff Gellner and my mountain faring colleagues. He went all in, as you can see. There's a picture of his lovely family on the right-hand side. Miss him dearly, and stay in touch with those folks and support them if we can. So just so it's not a complete mystery for those who've never seen it or heard about it, we haven't really been very good in some ways about promoting it because we're mainly working for the US government and haven't brought it to industry. I'll try to mention that just before we close. But it's a 4-phase methodology focused on consequences and prioritization of those things. So like I said in the beginning, it's only about the things that matter most, not the entire enterprise-wide security program. Phase 2, we'll talk about a little bit, but what's the ecosystem across which the adversary would navigate? And phase 3 is one of the founders, along with Mike, is often called CCE, a targeting exercise. That's really what it's for. How to get after and build the kill chains and develop and test and ultimately get ready to deliver the payloads. And phase 4 is probably the most interesting part to lay people, which is instead of, once we've identified all these things, instead of turning to, what you find in the exhibition hall of the Moscone Center, we typically, and the next generation of AI, Bitcoin-enabled blockchain firewalls, we look first to first principles engineering techniques, things that have worked for hundreds of years, perhaps many centuries, to take the targets off the table so that if the adversary gets that far, by digital means, they ultimately are stymied. I have to go back a slide. Hold on, let me see. Okay, sorry about all that. Hope that didn't make anybody sick. Just want to let you know the intent of the vision for CCE, we'll see if we can deliver on it over time, is to change the world, even if at first we're doing it national security organization by national security organization, very methodically. Ultimately, we are in the midway through letting it loose, licensing it, or at the early stages, actually. But in the words of my boss, Zach Tudor, where he pointed me back to the Carnegie Mellon capability maturity model for software, circa 1994-95, the chance that a software development project of any size would be successful back then were vanishingly small. You could throw tens or hundreds of millions of dollars at it, still not a better than a 50-50 chance that you would have success, and you would have wasted a heck of a lot of time. In some ways, at least in my opinion, this may not be yours, the cybersecurity world today is a lot about throwing money at things and hard to tell whether you're ultimately going to be successful against a variety of different adversaries. And one thing my INL colleagues, including Jeff, will tell you is that when it's top tier adversaries that really are after you, and they're after you because you're critical infrastructure, they will have success getting through. CCE assumes access. We're trying to bring this type of capability and understanding to bear broadly across critical infrastructure, and let's see if we're successful with that. Richard Danzig, along with Dan Gear, who I cite all the time, just want to say the idea that we're in continuously contested territory, very similar to what Tim Conway was saying at the end. There's no one-stop solution to any of this. It's just constantly on a treadmill, trying to be your very best and never letting up. Okay, that's it. I'm slightly off my mark, but Jeff, you're up. He's going to take you to a wonderful, wonderful, if fictional so far, country called Baltavia, although I think he might pronounce it differently. Jeff, take it away, and I'll turn the slides for you. Did I accidentally say level 0 and Jeff disappeared?
He's here.
I'm off. I'm in level 0. I'm making things work. Okay, thanks, Eddie. So let's talk about consequence-based targeting, and later on identifying protections and mitigations to keep things operating, right? Make them more resilient. And we'll use our Baltavia case study example. Go ahead, Andy. Can you forward the slides for me?
You betcha, Jeff.
Yeah, right there. Okay, thanks. All right, exploited. It's pretty obvious that we are being exploited. Our systems are being exploited. So what are we missing? Current events or not so current events, 1, 10, 20 years would indicate that our approach to protecting our critical infrastructure environments, all ICS for that matter, has some room for improvement. How can that be when we have the latest and greatest operational and security technologies? We have controls, communications, network monitoring, endpoint protection, access control, asset management, right? All state of the art. We even have mapping of known and common TTP for certain threat actors and groups. So what are we missing here in our security approach? Why are we still being impacted? Go ahead, Andy.
How do you like how I'm turning your slides so far?
Go back about 3 slides. One more.
Yes.
Go back.
SANS does a lot of measuring. Jeez.
Yeah.
I'm not going to score very well on this now, am I? Okay, here we go. 1.
Okay. Hold. Oh, hey.
One more.
One more forward.
Okay. It's a very sensitive mouse I've got here.
Okay. Hold it right there.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Yeah. Okay. So what are we missing in our security approach? Why are we still being exploited and impacted? We need to recognize that the adversary is targeting our critical functions, right? So I really appreciate that earlier in the conference, Rob and Joe, they both discussed, with quite a bit of focus and put time on the fact that really we're talking about building resilience into our production systems, into these control systems, right? And our ability to deliver critical functions. So I really like that that these efforts and the focus is all related. We're not talking about the adversaries targeting Tony, in marketing or PR. Bonus points for anybody that recognizes the character being portrayed on the left there. We're not talking about that kind of thing. For CCE, we're talking about adversaries targeting critical functions, delivery of which enable modern life, right? We're talking about energy, electricity, natural gas, communications and data services, water treatment and clean water delivery, those kinds of things, right? For organizations that operate in these sectors, impacts for them, impacts to their critical functions, that's a worst case scenario for them, but it can also potentially have regional and national security consequences. So the adversary is targeting critical functions. What else? What do we do with that? On its own, it's not exactly much of a security or resilience type solution, right? But it is an important subtle shift in how we approach making improvements. Okay, Andy, next one, please.
Yeah, good luck. Here we go. How do you like that?
Nice. Okay. All right. So let's look just a little bit deeper. The adversary accomplishes their goal by exploiting our delivery of the critical functions. And what do we mean by that, right? Well, we mean the infrastructure, the PPT, the systems that the entity uses to both logically and physically deliver those critical functions. We're calling these enabling functions, right? The key words there are logically and physically deliver. That's what the adversary is exploiting. It's how we get work done. Enabling functions are not only technology, hardware, software, firmware, communications, security platforms, so on and so on. It's also the deployment, the configuration of those devices, dependencies that we build in, client-server relationships, architectures, how we operate those systems, right? The processes, procedures that we follow, how we get work done in a manual fashion versus an automated fashion, all of those things, support, internal support, external, supply chain, integration, all of those things. The adversary is looking to understand those better than we do and exploit weaknesses within that, right? For each entity and organization, components in the enabling functions are often common, but implementation is unique. So within a company, you may have common platforms for one function or another, but the way it's implemented even from site to site within that same company, or certainly across sectors, would be different. Let's take an example from the energy sector, right? As we know, delivery of critical functions delivering power, delivering water, delivering gas, all those things is complex, right? Systems, technologies, deployments, operations, the way we get the work done is complex. If we take a gas-fired combined cycle plant as an example, right? Huge example. Like this would take forever to go through this, but just look at the complexity that we are implementing here. 5 primary systems, 96 subsystems. It's got a topping cycle, bottoming cycle, heat rejection, electrical systems, plant integration systems. It's got air compression, gas turbines, supporting systems, steam turbine, heat recovery, steam generation, condensate, feed water, on and on and on and on. Each of those is going to have layers of operational security technologies to support different functions and processes. Can you imagine any dependencies or potential risks to electricity generation, which is the critical function for that one plant, one combined cycle plant, right? It only exists to make electricity, to generate power, right? But it's implemented with 96 subsystems. Can you imagine any exposure to impacts within those 96 subsystems? Well, of course you can, right? Vast amounts of complexity, but we need to understand that. Current events, water delivery systems in Texas for gas-fired power plants, right? For this exact plant, could an adversary through human exploitation of the water delivery systems achieve the same impact that Mother Nature did by dropping the temperature, right? Those are questions we need to ask ourselves and work to provide resilience and restoration capabilities within those systems. Enabling functions, again, the takeaway here is that it equals delivery. We need to recognize and understand at an engineering level the complexity inherent in our delivery. If not, we're sustaining unnecessary risk and providing blind spots for the adversary to take action. Let's look at another aspect of enabling functions. Next slide, please, Andy.
Okay, Jeff, and just a caution for those of you who can't tell, that's a semester worth of material on this slide right here. So we'll have to be pretty brisk as we go to Baltavia.
Yep, good. All right, thanks. Right, so in how we deliver that critical function of power delivery, water delivery, gas transmission, whatever it is, right? We are introducing vast complexity. We need to address that and understand it, right? Not provide a place for the adversary to misbehave, right? But in addition to that, we also often introduce unverified trust, right? So the adversary will definitely try to leverage any unverified trust that we have built into our systems. Examples of which are pretty obvious to all of us, right? Engineered connectivity that we have to build into our systems, right? The people, process, technologies, everything else that are absolutely requisite for modern delivery of these critical functions. But we need to be aware of any unverified trust we are engineering into the system, right? Controls and monitoring platforms, right? Device-to-device comms. We may have communications within those devices across different functions within the process, across different processes entirely, right? Those would be examples of engineered controls, unverified trust. Asset management platforms, SolarWinds, perfect example, right? Remote operation support, the Oldsmar water treatment plant in Florida, TeamViewer. Application development, dependency confusion attack demo. Read that article, really good. Vendor code repositories, right? Another example of unverified trust. So the shortfall here, and we're seeing it play out in our current events, is that we're often not focused on holistically implementing all of these systems, right? How it's engineered and implemented. We often implement in an a la carte type fashion to support a localized objective or function rather than delivery of the critical function. Next slide, please, Andy. So keep that in mind. A quick look at a case study from the book, the Baltavia utility, right? Baltavia substation power outage. So let's talk quickly about targeting and use the case study as an example. In the case study, Baltavia, a transmission operator, among other things, right, has ambitions to be viewed as a reliable net power provider to the European market. Their critical function of power delivery relies on their transmission system. That means they're a transmission operator, right? That's their critical function for delivering power. If you look at the diagram on the slide there, we've identified a few critical functions based on real-time operations and analytics for a transmission operator. Take note that the adversary has several targeting options for disrupting their ability to perform as a transmission operator, to function in that way, right? They could impact the analytics and disable or impact the utility's ability to understand their infrastructure, present state, project future states, respond accordingly, right? In our case study, we focus on basic breaker manipulation through the breaker control platform, right? That's where we're focusing the narrative. So let's move from targeting that physical infrastructure control and start asking questions about, well, how is that accomplished? How does the utility accomplish that? And what would an adversary want to exploit to do the same or do something similar out of time, right? How is power delivery enabled? What systems are engineered to deliver that power delivery? What technologies are deployed? How is it operated and supported? How is it purchased? Where do I have unverified trust? Next slide, please, Andy. Thanks. Okay, again, following the case study narrative, right? In our case study, we focus on exploitation of 3 key elements in the utility systems within their enabling functions. Again, that's where we're living as an adversary, right? Why? I'll list a few and then ask yourself why each is valuable, right? In the case study, target 1 is the engineer's laptop. Why is that valuable? Because it comes with trusted connectivity into the control system environment. It's running applications and services that provide controller configuration and battery management system configuration capabilities, right? Target number 2 is the battery management control system itself. Why would an adversary care about a low voltage DC power system in a substation, right? Well, it's the energy source for physical breaker functionality, close and trip operations. It provides electric power for the actuators, for the spring charging motor, and for operation of the trip and close coils. It also provides origination for any alarming once it's attacked. In this case, the way they have this system implemented, it's the sole source for indication that something is going on with the battery management system. And target number 3, engineering workstation that is networked already in the environment. Really obvious target there. Provides sustained trusted access within the environment and all the applications and connectivity needed to manipulate the infrastructure. One thing about this diagram, though, there is one device here that's not a digital device at all, or there's one key artifact here that we need to point out. The diagram on bottom right. Why would that be valuable to an adversary? Something like that, right? Here's where we get beyond technologies. The diagram itself is extremely valuable and useful to an attacker because it explains the logic behind the processes that are engineered and deployed in this system to open and close breakers. Any permissives that are required, all those kinds of things. Highly valuable to an attacker. Something else to keep in mind when protecting your environments. Okay, Andy, next slide, please.
Sure, Jeff.
Back 1. Okay, protections and mitigation. So again, we're following the case study narrative. Protections, true protection eliminates the possibility of the impact from that particular form of sabotage, right? So in our case study, if we really want to maintain functionality of the DC power system in that station and in all of our stations, you know, to provide a protection, we need to eliminate the possibility of sabotage to the functionality of that DC power system. So again, we're talking about the function, right? In this example, an engineered protection would really just be, instead of having only a networked controller controlling our DC power system and managing that system, we're going to have local sensing, right? Local for loss of voltage, and then some kind of electromechanical failover to an alternate DC energy source within the station. And if these 3 stations in the case study are as critical as they're made out to be for this power delivery to the Eurozone market, then cost for that type of system certainly would not be an issue. Engineering fixes are not going to work in every case. As you identify worst case scenarios and bad impact events for your particular organization, you're not always able to engineer a complete protection solution. But at a minimum, you can always identify and improve your response and restoration capabilities through implementation of detection and other response and recovery mechanisms. So really quick on the end there, but that's back to you, Andy. We can answer questions later.
Okay. All right, Jeff. Thank you. Thank you very much for introducing us to Baltavia. And with any luck and the pandemic runs its course, the next time we do a SANS ICS summit, hopefully it'll be in Florida around this time. And maybe the European version can be actually hosted by the Baltavians in the capital city of Baklavan. I'm going to give you just now, everybody, just a couple, we'll pull you out of that deep case study and give you something a little bit lighter as you head into the official SANS lunch break in a few minutes. So when we talk about not just doing USG work for critical national security missions or owners, but helping to bring what Jeff described to a broader audience, referring to that as CCE at scale. And I'll talk to you about, in some ways, right at that and a little bit to the side of it as we do it's a handful of remaining slides. I think Oldsmar is instructive in that after the DHS CERT alert came out, or sorry, when it came out, I'm only giving you a piece of it here. It has the usual statements about make sure all your cyber controls are in place, which I think everybody is used to seeing those, that comes across them regularly. But then it has this section down here, and I put the green arrow on it. These things are very much in the spirit of the CCE engineered mitigations. Like if with Oldsmar, right? If you get a digital command from somebody far away, or maybe not too far away, that says, I want you to go ahead and instead of put in the usual amount of chemical, I want you to put in 1,000,000 times that amount, go ahead and dump it now. But knowing that this was a possibility, because this water utility didn't have a lot of resources to throw at cyber, and even if it did, if it's a top tier adversary, then those resources may not ultimately keep the wolves at bay. If you size the container, the vessel, the barrel, the bucket, it's holding previously mentioned dangerous chemical, so that even if it is told to dump itself all at once, that amount does not cause a public health problem or a national security problem. It just means you have some forensics to do, and that because you size that vessel appropriately, because you thought about this, that you didn't have the very bad day that the adversary seemed to be intending to give you, okay? And we've briefed DHS. It's possible that this is directly CCE informed. It's not cited, but it's definitely in the spirit of how to keep the worst from happening. One of my favorite parts of the book is, and it's one of the varieties of mitigations that we recommend, is putting a trusted, intelligent human being back in the loop. And to me, the sidebar we did in that section, the section on phase 4, where we bring in Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov, my guess is most of you won't have heard his name or the story. Suffice it to say that this man didn't do what he did in 1983. We wouldn't be at an ICS conference right now, virtual or in person. We probably wouldn't even be right now. He is part of the team that was creating the Soviet version of the NORAD missile detection system, highly computerized, highly automated, all of our favorite words. And when it signaled in the early hours of September 26th that a lot of ICBMs were coming inbound to the Soviet Union, everyone in the control room got very agitated. When they checked for confidence, there was a way to check for confidence. They learned that it was very high. The machine said, yep, this is for sure. And they were getting ready to tell the senior leaders of government that it was time to launch, because before our missiles landed, and we would have had a big rip-roaring World War III. Petrov knew that there were some issues with the software and with the algorithms and some of the sensors that might give false positives, and said, everybody take a deep breath, hold on. this might not actually be as real as it seems, even though alarms and klaxons were sounding and everyone was panicking. And he did, through force of personality, persuade people just to hold off a little bit longer. And as they did, they were able to get in touch with other warning sites that said, we don't see anything. This is kind of weird. And ultimately they stood down and didn't launch what would have become World War III. Just having that human there, even though we could have got rid of, and we have gotten rid of Petrov and a million critical infrastructure sites due to efficiency and automation. It's not a bad idea for certain things to have that person still around, or to have a person around who can make an intelligent decision at the right time. Part of the way that we're going to scale with CCE is through training. Originally, this Accelerate course, which was 2 days in person and now is 4 4-hour sessions in virtual, kind of the way SANS has tailored theirs too. Originally, we could only go very slowly, but thank you, pandemic. Now we can do them internationally, and we can do several a week if we need to. And the size of the room isn't limited to just 20 people. It can be much more than that. That also includes a big, thick manual on the right-hand side. So if you're trying to do CCE to yourself, or you're a service provider, and you want to be able to bring it to customers, either as training or as an engagement, we pretty much give you all the tools with a fairly easy licensing process to go through. This will be my last word, I think, and I know you're getting close to lunch break, SANS people. Just to refresh, we call Tier 1 what our teams based in Idaho do per guidance of the United States government. That's your DHS, DoD, DOE, Intel community, and bring that to certain infrastructure providers and military mission owners. Tier 2, though, is everybody else. We've already had a number of utilities in the United States, in Japan. Water utilities are moving out on this, believe it or not, with some speed. You're going to hear from some water utility friends. I believe it's either later today, but it might be tomorrow. They're going to do a water sector in a CCE informed discussion with you. But it's something that you can do to yourself, and it's something that you can have a trusted integrator or engineering partner or OT services provider help you walk through it. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, this is how you reach me. Until we meet again, I'll be on the Slack thing for a little while. Don't forget about a trip to Baltavia. Put that in your schedule sometime. It's a beautiful country. Thanks to Jeff, and thanks to everybody that helped organize this. It's wonderful to be with SANS again.
Baltavia has Dunkin' Donuts. Thank you, Andy. That was fantastic. I have one thing that I would like to ask. So you just walked through Tier 1, which is sort of big, important things that get selected and INL points a spear at. Sure. Tier 2, kind of people consume, they go after. And as they look at kind of these 4 stages of consequence prioritization, system of system analysis, and those are things that kind of, they have some expertise and they share expertise with people who come in to perform. But when they start looking at the consequence-based targeting and the mitigations, those are unique areas where they look to that kind of expertise. And as it's all done, this long process, kind of this very complex system of systems analysis, consequence prioritization, targeting, that's a long road. And when you hit the mitigations piece, then you get to start again, because now you have different prioritizations that come up and you have different things of different levels of importance. So the question that I have is really, how would you respond to somebody asking, is CCE right for me? Like, I'm a small water utility in Springfield, Illinois. Do I start this process? Because INL is not going to start it for me. I'm not going to be in Tier 1 and they're not going to show up saying, have we got something great to give you? So how do I pursue it, and should I?
Is CCE for me? Does CCE make me look fat? These are good questions, Tim. And I am confident that the Dunkin' Donuts in Baklavan will open properly.
Do I first buy your book, and then second, do I pursue CCE?
If you don't pursue it, it will pursue you. I'll just say this, that the smaller organizations that have implemented it and have reported success, they have, and this may rankle some of the purists in Idaho, where the holy Olympic flame of CCE burns brightly. That a number of organizations have been able to identify the types of systems and processes which, where they lose them, they'd be dead in the water. It's called strategic business risk. It's corporate viability if you're a commercial enterprise, and it's mission kill if you're military. A number have been able to walk themselves through to their own satisfaction on phase 1. Phase 2 can sometimes confound them, but they have some expertise, typically in-house or third party. Phase 3, the targeting thing, we think that's the rarest of the skills. OT targeting, different from IT targeting, and yet something that we urge our prospective partners to either bring to the table or to get to acquire in one way or another. We can help them with that. Dale Peterson, I think, and others chime in when they say, really, if you do a shorter version and just do phase 1, identify the things that can't fail at all, ever, for any reason, and then go to phase 4, and like that Oldsmar example gave, changing the size of a bucket or a barrel from way too big that could cause problem if it was emptied at one time to something that's much more manageable. It might be a hassle because you have to refill it more often, but that hassle would allow you to sleep at night. I mean, really sleep at night, knowing that were intruders able to get that far, they wouldn't have success. So yes, I think there are lighter versions that can prove satisfying to all different types of companies.
That's great. I appreciate it. I am a strong supporter of the Olympic flame that burns brightly in INL of CCE. I really, really would love to see this kind of adoption across critical infrastructure, internationally, everywhere you go, just thinking about your operating environments in that way. Thanks again, Andy, and thank you, Jeff.